Hello, everyone. Welcome to another office hour. This is Dr. Claire Moon coming to you live from my office, my home office. Welcome. If you are here, you're probably into astrology. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Basically, if you look over to the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a chat box. You can put any questions you have in there. I don't expect, around the holiday season, a ton of people to show up. So I should be able to keep. Yeah, hello, Kaylon, you made it. Congrats, welcome. Put your questions in the chat. I should be able to keep track of them pretty good tonight, I think. Otherwise, so I didn't do a call for questions this time. I said I was going to last night, and then I didn't because I did have a backlog, and I found some good backlog things. I owe Ashley a response. I have a correction from last month that Dr. Patty helped me out with, so we'll be talking about what the what the Latin of MC is and all that good stuff. There's a few things. We're going to talk about Venus and Scorpio. We're going to talk about, there was a few potpourri topics, just random things. Uh, yeah. And then we'll see what questions people have as well. Um, oh, and I wanted to talk about Saturn a little bit as well and sex in the eighth house because there was just, I mean, I know we're all tired of it because there was just a discussion about that on Twitter. But yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about it because sure, what the heck? I want to put in, you know, my 2 cents, I guess, and just cover the bases. Short answer, long answer, short. I agree with everyone, kind of, for the most part. Uh, I agree with a lot of takes. But hi, Kaylong. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. If you are listening to this later, feel free to put any comments below. If you have any questions, I do keep track of uh, the comments. If you have a question for next month, because I do this every second Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. Central Time, I'll get it the next month. Okay, that works too. Or DM me on Instagram. That's like the one thing with Instagram. I actually don't mind when people send me DMs for the most part. Usually people are pretty respectful with that. So if you have a question you want me to answer, that's another cool way to contact me. Thank you so much for the little tip. I appreciate it, Kaylong. I do have super stickers. If you do like what I'm doing today, if you learned something, if something's helpful, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe if you want to keep up with this. And if you're feeling super duper generous, of course, I do accept tips in the form of super stickers. Excuse me. It does help me keep the lights on and it does help me stay in business basically. I do like to give back though. So on that note, I do consultations. My books are wide open. I do have a sliding scale. So if finances are what is keeping you from astrology, I don't ever want that to be the case. I have a pretty decent sliding scale where we can meet for 30 minutes for not that much money at all. So, and if it's still too much, we'll work something out. We'll figure it out. Just email me at aligninglightastro@gmail.com. You can check out more information about that on my website, www.astrology.com. But with that, let's get to it. Let's talk about Venus and Scorpio. Ashley had asked about this last month, and I forgot to talk about it. But let's bring up the chart and look at her in the sky. Let's see. Hello, Reverend Kai. Welcome back. So right now, Venus is entering into the middle part of Scorpio. She is in the middle 10 degrees of the middle decan. And I'm going to bring up the more detailed wheel here. Uh, is this the one? Yeah, this is the one. So when we look at a planet in a sign, of course, we've got all of the symbolism that goes with that. But that symbolism comes from somewhere. And a lot of that we can stumble upon when we're looking at the condition of a planet in a place. So for Venus, she is on the nighttime team of planets. It is Venus, Mars, and the moon. That's our nighttime, night sect set of planets. And then we also have Sun, Jupiter, Saturn. That's our daytime set of planets. Uh, Venus, being a nighttime planet, then is going to have a certain set of affinities or preferences with where she is based on being a nighttime planet. So, for instance, Venus likes to be in a nighttime sign, a nocturnal feminine sign, which are all the water and earth ones. Venus really jives with that. Um, Another thing, Venus also likes the triplicity of water and earth. If we look at triplicity lords, triplicity rulerships, which is not listed here. Let me see. I'm gonna I'm gonna bring him up. Hold on. Let me just share my whole screen. Here we go. So, for instance, here's the triplicity lords. If we look at the places where Venus has triplicity rulership, it's all of the nocturnal signs, the earth and the water. So that just gives you an idea of, looking at a planet and a sign, looking at their condition, we have to think, okay, do they actually enjoy where they are? Do they actually do their things about them agree with the place that they're in? And the other things too is then looking, okay, so Venus is in a water sign, she's in a nighttime sign. And then we can look and see too that even though Venus, she is the farthest away from her nighttime home, so she is in exile, she is under-resourced in this place, which is not super fun. So that will work into our interpretations later on when we get to synthesizing and bringing in symbolism as well, and myth and things like that. But we also have to consider that even though she is a bit under-resourced in Scorpio, there are little places within here where she's a little better off. So when we're looking, if you're really wanting to get into the nitty-gritty of someone's chart, if you have someone who's really worried about their Venus and Scorpio and like, oh no, am I doomed? Am I never going to find love? Or never, am I never going to, make beautiful arts or whatever? Of course you will. But especially if you have Venus in their own decan or bound. I mean, that helps, right? We get a little bit more ease than we might expect otherwise. We get a little bit more favorable outcomes than we might expect otherwise. So Venus in Scorpio, I mean, could be worse. She could be in Aries. That's fire in daytime. you know? So if I could pick Venus and Scorpio versus like Venus and Aries, just looking at all these technical little details, just on that, not to denigrate anyone's Venus and Aries experience. I know several of you and you're amazing. Um, but just based on these stats, yeah, like, Venus in a nighttime water sign might have some outcomes that jive more with what Venus is about. So Venus is about connection. That's what she does. She is two. She brings things together. She brings people together, ideas together. And that really jives with water. Water is also a connecting agent, a connecting influence. So those two things also go together, just if we're looking at kind of rough archetypal affinities. Um, so what about Venus and Scorpio? What is it to have a planet that's not very well resourced in a place and they're trying to do their thing? So Venus is trying to do relationship in Scorpio. She's trying to do relationship under the auspices of Mars. Venus is trying to do relationship. She's also trying to get her preferences met here and trying to enjoy herself under the auspices of Mars. So what is it to really prefer and want and desire? Venus, I want, desire, 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 with Mars at her back saying, go, 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 go. So we can see like deep yearning, deep desire, because we have that Mars that's kind of focusing and driving with that action and motivation, right? Connection under the auspices of Mars. Let's go back to that. Mars is separation. But it's also that drive again. So maybe, with relationship, if we have Venus and Scorpio, when we like someone, we really like someone, you know? If I, same thing with ice cream. If I really like that ice cream, it's almost like I don't know if anyone has ever experienced this level of satisfaction from a thing. Deep satisfaction, deep feelings. And okay, deep feelings here, usually they're not super pleasant because Mars, but they can be when Venus is here, especially. Um, Deep yearning. So then also like deep lust, that's a thing. Have fun. Whew. We also have, okay, connection under the auspices of Mars, connection under separations, and cutting and that harshness, that um, challenge that Mars brings of conflict when we're trying to connect. So all of a sudden we're seeing, okay, well, maybe that's how we can understand Scorpio being betrayal, and ouchies, especially fixed water. It's not moving. It's sticking. Oh, happy Leo rising. It's Leo time. Um, yeah, those feelings are sticking. Those feelings are hanging around long enough for me to feel them extra intensely. Grudges, kind of same thing, just water that's not moving. And then Mars, Mars can be, that cutting away, anger, aversion, that umbrella of aversive feelings, bitterness, things of that nature. Although I think, well, Saturn and Mars. Sometimes I get mixed up with, or maybe there's a Venn diagram. I feel like bitterness and aversion, and, Saturn is definitely rejection, but Mars can be cutting away. So what is it to try to have connection when things are cut away or cut short? And we can have abandonment or betrayal in those ways. That's rough. So that's real. If you've had those experiences and they've impacted your life and you've got a Venus and Scorpio in your chart, I hope that's at least validating, not just like, yeah, ouchie. Um, Venus and Scorpio, what is it to have values? So Venus is values. It's what we care about. We think about ethics and morals, Libra. Um, what is fair and sustainable in relationship? If there's two, if it's the coming together of things, if it's connection, how is that connection sustainable and fair and balanced? Venus things. So with Scorpio, then, um, it can be conflict about ethics, conflict about morals, pain, betrayal, loss, separations due to ethics or morals, anything like that. It's a lot that you can unpack there and play with. And it's not all unpleasant, although, of course, we can see the potential for lots of challenges there. Because again, Venus wants harmony, usually. She wants balance. She wants sustainability. She wants connection. And she's in a place that is about separation. Even though it's a fixed sign, Mars, in and of itself, Mars, the ruler of Scorpio, traditionally, Mars is instability. Mars is before we had Uranus. Mars was the lord of instability. So, what is it trying to connect when we're on like a battlefield, when it's just constant conflict, when it's whatever? Or when there's like tension, Mars having to put in effort, tension, moving toward a goal, kind of relentlessly. There's not a lot of time for the humanity of Venus and softness and stillness and yums. There's not necessarily time for that when we're in survival mode. So that's another thing I see a lot. Now, the example I've been using a lot lately, talking about Venus trying to do things that Venus does, being under-resourced and how that can turn out. And this is a great example of the ingenuity and the resourcefulness and the creativity that a planet in exile or in its fall ends up developing over the course of its life through these challenges of not having or not, having to work harder at some of these things. Whether, that's coming from internally, externally, or both. But anyway, the flight attendant who's trying to make yummy foods for people to enjoy while they're like trying to make people comfortable while they're on an airplane in the sky, like thousands of feet in the air. And it's like so cold out there, in the air. And we just have like a microwave and like TV dinners to work with. Like, ugh, like it's so sad and it's like Venus, I just want to make these people comfortable and enjoy themselves. And now I have to charge them with a credit card just so I can give them this tiny thing of rum. It's just so difficult. and Venus is doing it though, and we appreciate them all the more for it. Um, yeah, Venus in Scorpio. So, I guess last thing, a planet in its detriment, exile, being really far away from home, especially when it's in fall, as well, like Venus and Virgo, they can feel a sense of not belonging. They can feel a sense, and especially for Venus, that's tough because that's like also one of her things, connecting with others, belonging. And it's that sense of not fitting in, being different, having, with Venus, having preferences that aren't shared by those around me that other people don't understand. They don't get why I like the pickled herring. They don't get it. Or I have values or ethics or something that's different from the people around me and they don't get it. And especially in a Mars territory, we can even get into some very serious topics of safety. And having to then in your relationships constantly threat assess and be exhausted or under-resourced because you're not, it's a hostile environment potentially, because those values, ethics are not shared, and then there's not a safety element that's happening. I'm seeing that come up in social media right now, actually, with like talking about activism and like who's doing what. So, here, it's in my 10th. I'll say it. I'm pro-Palestinian. Don't worry, y'all. Like, I'm not one of those crazy, woo-woo to alt-right pipeline people. That's not it. This is not that stop. I used to be a sciencey person. I'm vaccinated. There's my ethics and morals. And there's a lot of people, when I go home, oh boy, I was definitely the only person in a mask about a year and a half ago at a dance recital. Like that was weird. So you can kind of feel a little like an outsider, and it can feel threatening, and it can actually be threatening. So I just want to validate that. Um, but then the other thing too, so okay, last thing. And I have a Mars in Scorpio. So I'm going to take like having you don't need to have a planet in a place to understand it. Let's just be clear on that. But I think it helps a little bit. I think it helps a little bit. Um, really strong threat detector. Very, even if you're not seeing it externally, inside, the little whiskers are in attack mode. The little whiskers are feeling around. The little antennas are going. We're trying to always see what's between the lines and threat assess, and that's why we're good at it. We can get into paranoia though, and that can be really harmful to our relationships if we are just constantly assuming threats that aren't actually there. And again, I don't say that to invalidate anyone or gaslight anyone, but like, I know from experience, our threat detectors are strong, but they are not 100% accurate. Speaking for myself there, that's all I can do. But there it is. That's what I have to say. I'm going to see if there's any questions about Venus in Scorpio. Hello, Clarkson. Welcome back. Um, just quit your job that you hated for the longest time to bet on yourself and pursue your passion. Congratulations. That's a big, hard, brave thing. That's very Scorpio. Scorpio is very brave. And yeah, not knowing all of the next steps is very, very difficult. The brain likes to have certainty. So, and that's another thing with Scorpio too, is that, it's like there's a lack of certainty. And in that void sometimes of information, we have to connect things, right? But when we don't have that, if you're following your passion, if you're just going for something, you just got to kind of take the next step and the next step and the next step. So congratulations. It's amazing. And like too, mm, it depends on so many things. But yeah, life is short, and it's life is short. So that's good. And I always say the worst case, most of the time the worst case is you're just going to end up back where you started, doing a similar job, with similar people. That you'll just end up back where you started, and you can try something else, right? Like worst case. That's what I always told myself, and that helped me a lot. So yeah, congratulations on being brave. Let's see. If anyone has any questions, of course, you can put them in the chat. So what else did I want to talk about today? Oh, I wanted to talk about the midheaven. So let's get back to a simpler wheel. So we've got the midheaven, the MC. And a month ago, I was commenting on the midheaven and saying that the MC, it meant median Chile, and that I didn't know what that meant. And that was true. Median, middle. And we know this is the sky, the median. And I said it was it's the top of the sky, but I didn't remember what Chile, Ceoli, what did Chile mean? But don't worry, y'all, because Dr. Patty came swooping in with the details on that. Um, Medium Chile. Oh no, it's Coeli is Latin for middle of the sky. Uh, she had mentioned like if you're familiar, and granted, trigger warning church, but if you're familiar with church and liturgical music, there's phrases cieli et terre, which means heaven and earth. Uh, so yeah, Chile. It means sky. Median Chile. Median, middle of the sky. There you go. And so likewise, I see now Imam Chile means bottom of sky, the subterraneous point. So there, now we're clear on that. Thank you, Dr. Patty, for sending me that. Because, and it's something I probably / should have Googled, but I'm going to be real. I don't hate when people just spoon feed me things. That's kind of nice. I can appreciate that. So thank you so much. Um, Yeah, and Kay Long brings up a really good point with Mars and Scorpio, one that I agree with. I suppose there's still a difference between being on high alert and simply very perceptive. Yeah, and that's like the cool thing about Scorpio is that there is this level of very fine perception that you do see things between the lines. So that's why I wanted to say like it's very effective for the most part. It's very powerful, very, very powerful, but nothing is 100%. We're not robots. We're just not robots. I'm sorry. I want to be 100% accurate. I'm not. I'm a pharmacist. I was actually, if anyone, if they try to make a human to be 100% accurate unnaturally, we know, yeah, there's a few professions that they really get that hammered on them, and it is surgeons, flight control operator people, and pharmacists. We're pretty much the ones. So I know what it is to be have to be accurate. So I think I'm in a good shape to be like, yeah. But yeah, high perception, that's the gift of Scorpio. And so when Venus is in Scorpio, then we can use that gift of perception to in our relationships, basically. We can use that gift of fine perception to see what's going on. What are the, it's almost like seeing what are people's motivations too. What is their intention with this, which is really important. Of course, impact is extremely important, maybe even the most important, but intention as well. And I think Venus and Scorpio is a real opportunity to look at what our motivations and intentions are inside of us, whether it's with our actions or with our relationships. Um, yeah, very perceptive indeed. So let's see what else is on the list. And again, any questions, throw them in the chat. Oh, there was something too. Saturn. So the ancient folks like Valens talked about Saturn, and I mean, I've seen it in a lot of different texts, but Saturn in terms of exposures. And exposures being, okay, trigger warning death, trigger warning child death. Uh, Saturn anciently had to do with exposures of people, exposures of children, which was unfortunately common. People got left outside, sometimes on purpose. Um, and so that was a Saturn thing, being exposed to the harsh elements, particularly cold and extreme dryness. Mars, I suppose, would be more extreme heat, but they don't talk about exposure as much with Mars. But and so this is one of those ancient things where I was like, how does this show up now, outside of really extreme, horrible circumstances? But like, for most of us here on YouTube, how could this possibly show up? And I actually had a little idea from my own childhood, a really like tiny version, like a micro version of what Saturn exposures could be. And I'm not going to bring up my chart because I'm feeling Venus Scorpio paranoid right now. Um, but I have the ruler of my IC. I'll just bring up like my rising sign. I have the ruler of my IC. Oh, there, very convenient. Is in my 12th. So I've got Mercury ruling my IC. It's in the 12th, and it's in Capricorn. And I grew up in a cold place, and we weren't like, super poor. Like we were on food stamps, but I wasn't hungry. Like I never worried about being hungry. And I didn't even know we were on food stamps until I was like older. So, I wouldn't consider myself that poor, but poor enough that like, okay, so in the country, you have really long driveways and you have to get out to the school bus in the morning, like an hour before school starts because you got to pick up all the country kids and it takes forever. So I'd be out there at like 5:45, 6 in the morning at the end of the driveway. Like the sun hasn't even come up yet. It's like a blizzard because they never call school off because it's Minnesota. And it was freezing. And I'd be out there for like, and then the bus was late because it's literally a blizzard all the time. And like I went up to school, the hill both ways, all that. But it was really rough. And like all the other kids, not all of them, but a lot of them had these little huts at the end of their driveways that their parents made them so that they could at least be away from the wind, waiting for the bus in the morning. Um, and my dad always said he was going to build this one. Now, no shame on my father. He was a working man. He was working real hard. And P.S., my son is also in here. He was working hard, so not for lack of trying, but I never got my little hut. And I was like, holy shit, I think that counts as exposure. Like, does this count as exposure? Because yeah, we never got our little hut. And that was my life. And then I looked at the years when that was most prominent because I remember as a child, some years it being more of an issue than others, depending on the weather, depending on how tired I was as a child. Because, earlier on in my school days, I wasn't sick of it yet, but eventually, I'm, the 10 and I'm like, I'm sick of this shit. But I was looking at my annual profection years and at the Saturn years were the years I remember, like I was around the age that like I remember talking about it as a family and then it not happening. So yeah, I wanted to give that as my example of, what Vedius Valens might discuss as exposures that might come up. So, another thing too, I had a client once who slept outside on purpose, like, and they live up in like the Arctic circles or whatever. Um, they slept outside every week for a year. So maybe in their place of fun, they have Saturn, and like there's something about being exposed to the elements that, I don't know, is part of their fun that they end up doing. Uh, Kay Long says, fascinating. I also live in a town with many long driveways. Most people bring their cars down and sit in them with their kids when it's super cold or rainy. Oh, yeah, no, that never. Either you got a hut or you were on your own. Like that was it. Now, I do remember like there were some times um, my mom would pick us up at the end of the driveway so I wouldn't have to walk down it at the end of the day. That was always awesome. So yeah, anyway, I also, again, clearly walked uphill both ways, but little micro versions of these things. Because again, like a lot of the ancient authors, they give us really extreme examples. And like a medical textbook, they give you the most extreme picture. And then they kind of leave it up to you to be like, oh, well, what's the less extreme version of this in someone's life? Um, yeah. Okay. How fun. Oh, let's see. Oh, yeah. Let's talk about sex in the eighth. Because that was a fun thing, right? Every 6 months, everyone gets upset about what house talks about sex. And of course, at this point, hopefully we're all like, yeah, it could be a lot of them. But there are some main ones. I feel like there are some main ones. And let's see here. So there's the fifth house, there's the seventh house, and there's the eighth house. These are kind of the prime candidates. And modern astrology really looks at the eighth house as being about sex because they do the 12-letter alphabet where Aries is the first house, like a Venn diagram, where Aries and the first house are the same stuff, Taurus in the second, Gemini in the third. We don't do that in this household. No offense, I love astrologers who use that. It's a tool that you can use well. I just think it's a very dull blade. I don't do Scorpio in the eighth. So, this whole thing about transformation in the eighth, I think the eighth can be transformation, but it's not because of Scorpio. It's because this is where planets set. That's a huge, big change. It sure is. Uh, can the eighth be about sex? Heck yes, it can, but it's not because Scorpio is here and Scorpio has to do with genitals. I'm not making that association. I would make that association with the eighth because this is a place of exchange and sex is the oldest bartering chip that exists. So, one of them. So, yeah, and this place of exchange of resources, of coming together of resources. Yup. And how many spouses look at their partners? How many partners look at their partners and see them as pretty much just a sexual object or a resource? That happens all the time, unfortunately. None of that is like this connecty, soul contract binding, woo-woo sex stuff that I hear people talk about all the time with the eighth. Now, this is, of course, my own opinion. There are a lot of different ways to practice astrology, and I am kind of convinced also that like what if people need that kind of astrologer, that's who they need and that's who they'll find and they'll get what they need from them. That's cool. But if we're looking at this from a really critical, technical lens, which is what I'm doing here on this Q&A, and I'm a Hellenistic astrologer, then from that lens, from that viewpoint, um, there are ways of seeing sex in the eighth, but they're not these like warm and fuzzy ways that modern astrology talks about it. And and maybe it's just the client base that I end up getting, but yeah, eighth house sex, it's a lot of times complicated, potentially coercive, um, and potentially just transactional. I think that's the main word is transactionality, which is not good or bad. It's fine. And it's totally great for some people and what they need to do. So, or what they want to do. So yeah, eighth house, sex, sure. Transactions all day long. Um, Now the eighth house is also a place of, I've heard it also talked about in terms of like sex as a creative, generative type thing, which then I think about the eighth house being death and where souls are starting to, or where planets are setting to their leaving place, which is the seventh. The seventh house was originally death in a lot of ways too. Um, I don't know. I mean, I guess petite, everyone says, oh, well, the tiny death orgasms, petite la mort or whatever it is. It's like, yeah. I don't know. That doesn't do it for me. I'm not convinced that like that makes sex the eighth. If you want to talk about liminal, sneezing, death, orgasming, that's like some 12th house stuff, in my opinion. But again, that's just my opinion. But the creative generative part, I can see it in the eighth because, again, this is where we're putting resources together. And you can definitely get generative creative things when you put resources together. So I can see that. I can that makes sense to me. But not in like a warm and fuzzy kind of way, I guess. I don't know. So then we get to the warm and fuzzy kind of way. And I think that more has to do with the fifth. This is the joy of Venus. This is a place of like literal delights and pleasures. You know, a lot of animals have sex. Not all of them do it for pleasure, but we do. So that's a fifth house thing. Sometimes that leads to babies. Sometimes it doesn't. But I think, at least fun sex, like romantic, courtshipy type stuff, Tinder, that's all fifth housey stuff. Uh, so if I'm looking for that, like especially if people are on the dating game, I'm looking at what their fifth house is doing. Also, their lot of Eros. That's another thing. Look at the lot of Eros. That can speak to sex. The lots, Venus's placement, Mars's placement. Venus and Mars's connection in your chart, synastry wise, Venus Mars connections between you and the other person, that can speak to your sex. And that has nothing to do with houses. So there's lots of ways to look at it that way. Then the seventh house, this is, of course, the other. So, just stuff we do with the other, potentially the most closest others. Yeah, seventh house, sure. What the heck? And 2000 years ago, the seventh house was also a place of contracts, contractual obligations, marriage partners. 2000 years ago, and honestly, still today in a lot of places, people are not marrying for love. So that is incredibly seventh housey. There's not necessarily love and romance and warm and fuzzies here either. Sometimes this is, sex used to bind a contract. Um, but it is sex, especially if we just think of it as like, what do we do when we're with other people that we're close to? So I think all of these places have something to add. We also know, we mentioned lots and other planets that have to do with this. Looking at the chart, looking at the planetary ruler. So for this person, it would be Mercury and Sun are also planets that we could look at when we're looking at these things. Yeah, lots of things to look at to describe that topic in a chart. Certainly not going to be one thing. So if we can all agree on something, it's that it's not one place and it's not one thing. And it really, really depends on the type of sex that we are talking about. Very, very context dependent. I end my thesis. Uh, oh, I did have, oh, I had a piece of intel. Gal, I just heard. Who said this? Um, I heard that Austin Coppock might be releasing his book 36 Faces early 2024. So I know that's something I've been following for a while. In the community, we've all been waiting for the second edition to come out. It is like $1 billion online right now if you want a copy. So, a lot of us have just been kind of working off of other people who have the book and are teaching from it, or we are working off of his verbal lectures that he's done online. But early, I don't know what month, but I mean, the astrology is looking pretty good in January, February. So if we're doing like a cute little like Austin watch, like 2024, um, I'm gonna guess like January, February. I could be wrong, but that's my hope. So watch out for that book. Um, I had a fellow astrologer. They came into one of my tutoring sessions. Their name is Raisa Asakura, and they had uh, a great third house designation that they said that I could share because I loved it so much. I was like, I have to share this. This is great. And they gave the third house as LAN parties. Remember LAN parties? Do people still have those? Local area network where like all the nerds bring their computer towers together and then they play like computer games or whatever? That's very third housey, right? It's like literally your local area network. I love that. That was great. And I mean, this is something I've heard a few other people say, and now I'm blanking on their names, but it doesn't matter. I've heard it so many times now. Um, Third house is literally third spaces. And if you haven't heard the term third spaces, I really enjoy it. It is something that means somewhere that's not work and it's not home. So any third space that's not work, not home. Um, we don't have, there's kind of a third space crisis a bit in culture just because of the internet and online life. A lot of people aren't going to their bowling league like they used to. But the third house can describe some of there's these third spaces for us. So if you're someone who's kind of out there and wondering, well, if I'm looking for friends, if I've moved to a new place, what can astrology tell me about, where I could meet people locally? And for that, you can look to your third house, look for clues, look what planets are in there. For this person, I would look at where Mars is and what that might say, helping them meet people locally. But yeah, third house, literally third spaces, third places. That's great. Oh, we actually have a land person in the chat. I'm glad that landed. But glad that landed. I did it. I did a pun. Oh, sweet. Okay, so apparently that deadline is from the horse's mouth, and he has given himself a hard deadline. So that's super exciting. Um, Ooh, K Long brings up another good third space, interstitial tissue, interstitial fluids, like in between cells or even in between organelles inside of a cell. Yeah, yeah, totally. That's perfect. I love that. All right, last call for questions, if you got any. Hmm, did I really not have? I feel like I had more than this. Oh, I did find another cute thing I found was something that I wrote a couple years ago about Mercury in Sagittarius. And I kind of liked it. Oh, I found some other stuff too. Maybe I'll go over this. So, this is something that came up actually when I was looking at the nodes being in Taurus and Scorpio. So, yeah, I got one last topic I want to touch on, and then I'm gonna peace out for the night. Um, so when I was researching the nodes in Taurus and Scorpio, something that came up was this concept of the four elements of trust. And I had originally heard them from Preston Smiles. I don't know if that's his last name is Smiles or if that's about him smiling, but it's an account on Instagram, Preston Smiles. But he was the first person I heard about these four elements of trust. And then I looked into it a little bit more, and there's a few different authors who have a few different ways of going about it. But one of them is Charles Feltman and the Thin Book of Trust, an essential primer of building trust at work. I've never read it. I don't know what's in it, so don't hold me to it. And then Devin Vadika and the Principle of Leadership. But anyway, they are sincerity, reliability, competence, and care. These are some of the four things of trust, the four elements of trust. Another way, another one that shows so consistency, compassion, communication, and competency. That one's a little different. Um, but it's something that comes up a lot in these different versions. It's basically like, is this person consistent, dependable, reliable? Like, can I know what to expect from them? That is involved in trust. That makes sense, right? When people are inconsistent, unstable, surprising, that does not instill trust. Competence, um, that comes up a lot in these kind of four elements of trust. Are they able to do what they say they're going to do? Like, are they competent? Um, Sincerity, compassion, sincerity. That's kind of there or it's not there. Sincerity is there or it's not there. I think it's pretty hard to tell, or it's pretty easy to tell, at least for me, when people are being sincere or not. Um, and then, yeah, care, compassion, uh, that's also part of this. So, in the assessment that you have of other, I don't know, I'm going to read this. Hold on. The assessment, the person's interest in mind as well as your own. Yeah, I don't know what I was saying there, but I think this is good to look at again with Venus and Taurus, or sorry, Venus and Scorpio. So with Venus and Scorpio, think about what it is that makes us trust people or not. Um, if we're assessing like what our situation is and what our relationships are, if there's weird power dynamics or even kind of normal power dynamics, like between a physician and a patient or something like that. Um, in what ways can we think about like what do we need to feel trust and what can we do to instill trust in others? uh do we need to be more sincere, transparent? Do we need to be more reliable and consistent? Do we need to demonstrate competency in a way that we haven't before to someone, or maybe they have ideas about what is competency that we're not aware of? Maybe they require something that we aren't aware of and we need to communicate about that. And then care and compassion, and compassion does require, it requires openness, compassion requires us to ask questions, be curious, be compassionate. Part of that is being curious and open. Which, I mean, it's hard to do that, if there's not that trusting relationship between two people. It's very hard to be that person, to take that leap, to be caring and open and curious and patient. It's hard to do that when our guard is also up. So it's a delicate dance. Venus and Scorpio, the four elements of trust. Have fun, explore. I thought that was really interesting that I ran into that again. And then this is something that I had mentioned on my last forecast I did just last night, part 2. I'm doing the month in 2 chunks. So I had mentioned some nice things about Mars and Sag, because I had been kind of hard on Mars and Sag. But some nice things about Mars and Sagittarius is the enthusiasm that we have, the ability to inspire action, the ability to feel inspired, acting as a group, advocating for self, advocating for others, truth telling. We can bring ideas together. That's what Sagittarius and Jupiter like to do. They coalesce things. They like to make meaning, make a story, have understanding. We're really good at doing that right now, potentially, or putting in effort to do that. But the things to watch out for, with Sagittarius energy, especially Mars, especially with Mercury eventually coming back in here on the 23rd, which is only 9 days from now, a little over a week from now. A lot of this inspiration, being inspired to action, can lead to, premature starts, going too fast, errors coming from going too fast, are wanting to advocate, truth tell, do all of these very inspired actions can sometimes lead to irritation, impatience, or, even too extreme into maybe zealotry, or putting people off sides. And then the last thing too is just, again, just more in the mundane kind of day-to-day sense, just moving too fast and stubbing your toe, moving too fast and dropping your toast butter side down, stuff like that. So just be aware. There's a lot of things over the next couple weeks that are very cool and very exciting, but there are also a few pitfalls that we can pretty easily avoid, I think, if we just slow down, hold our horses. Literally, I used all my horse puns up. I can't use them anymore. All right, my friends. If I can't find one more thing, I'm going to look at the weather. And if I can't find anything in the weather to talk about, which I surely will, then that'll be it. Oh, and I guess maybe a little update while I'm here too. My research, I am done with the Moon Under Bond readings. I've done over 50 of them, and I've got at least 50 solid examples that I can start to read now or reread, and kind of, I need to sit with all the data now. I need to sit with all of the stories, see which ones have kind of the most vivid demonstrations of the techniques. There's a lot of things that have already started coming up with that research, that Moon Under Bond technique, that I wasn't really expecting. Because it almost seems like the technique itself is more like a collection, like a package deal of other more basic techniques. So I don't know, there's a lot I need to sit with it and write about it. It's going to be a good half a year. So just so you know, if you participated in that research, going to be 6 months at least. I need to definitely sit with it. But yeah, thank you to everyone who helped with that. Some very clear things, I guess, maybe I'll just do a little spoiler, like some things I was finding from this research. So Moon Under Bond technique, I'm not going to go into fully what it is, but essentially if you've got a balsamic or new moon or a full moon, so basically new or full moon, there's some conditions where we can see like a story that could happen about something that's potentially hidden or concealed, or something that is very rebellious that the person is doing, or contrarian. And we can see how that's going to turn out for the person, basically. Sometimes it brings up stories and validates them. The older the person is, that was one thing I found, that the older the person is, you can't really tell how it turns out yet if they're only in their 20s. So it was pretty hard to validate the second part of the technique, in anyone who was like under 40, basically. So that was kind of difficult. The other thing too is I think it just really shows how important it is to look at the aspects of the moon and what it's running into, and then look at the qualities of the moon. Like when the moon is new, it's really close to the sun, so it's hot. So then the last thing you would want then is, of course, the moon running into a hot planet like Mars through a square, versus the moon full. It's really far away from the sun. It's really cold. So you don't want it running into an opposition with Saturn. Um, so it's that's kind of the gist. I feel like I just totally got that ass backwards, but in any event, the kind of underlying thing holds is that it's really about these underlying things of quality, and is the quality of the moon in this moment like hot, cold, and what is its next aspect that it's making, which are already really basic things in the tradition. So I kind of ended up finding, I don't know, nothing. I don't know. I'm not sure yet. This is how research works, right? This is what happens. So yeah, it's gonna be like 6 months. It's gonna be a while I sort this out. And if I figure out what I figured out, I don't even know. Uh, Oh, Adam, that's okay. I mean, honestly, like I'm not like doing it. Like I don't have it as like an offering, but if we're in a session together, we can spend 15 minutes on it. I totally don't mind at all. Like I'm gonna use the same techniques. So let's see here. Anything else I want to discuss? So Mars entered Sagittarius, and I know somebody, this is just a little anecdote. I know someone with a Sagittarius fourth house, and this person has a barn. And a barn is a very fourth house thing. It's a building. And he was residing his barn. So he was putting in a lot of effort, Mars, into fourth house things. And he was painting, or he was residing his barn. So it was actually going from white. It's currently white. He's a Virgo rising, by the way. So I'll just bring up Virgo. How about that? It's a really cute example, though, of a few things. So, oh, what am I doing here? Much better. So Mars in Sagittarius in the fourth. It's my brother. I'll just say it's my brother. My brother is residing his barn and is going from white to red. And he's putting in a lot of effort, fourth house on buildings, and then also just Mars being red, being the color red, and him being very adamant, very almost zealot like on the phone. Like barns should be red. I was like, yes, barns should be red, absolutely. But yeah, I was like, this is perfect. Mars in the fourth, in Sagittarius, a place of very strong convicted beliefs about what color barns should be. Thought that was really, really cute. And he has a natal Mars in Aquarius. So his Mars is very, when he gets an idea, it's happening. He's doing it. Uh, I think that's the last thing I wanted to share. We're pretty much at time. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you. We will be here again. I mean, at the end of the month. I haven't chosen when I'm going to do my next forecast quite yet, but it'll be at the very end, the last few days of December probably. And then we will meet here again for the next Q&A on the 11th. And that's at 7 p.m. And then I guess that's really all I have going on. Announcements. I mean, I'm still doing readings. Like I mentioned, I'm done with my research. Working on a paper right now on empty houses that I hope will come into fruition at some point. That's my Mercury retrograde little mountain I'm climbing up. Yeah, other than that, follow me, keep up with me, subscribe, like, get a reading. I also do tutoring and mentoring. If you're looking for help either with the astrology techniques themselves, I do have mostly Hellenistic astrology. Of course, I include the outers and things like that, but that's my wheelhouse more is Hellenistic technique, including natal interpretation, electional astrology. Um, I don't do horary, don't do that, but electional natal. What am I missing? I mean, I do synastry, but that's not necessarily Hellenistic per se. And then too, also, if you are an astrologer yourself or trying to get to a place where you are able to work with others using astrology and you need help in that process or trying to get your sea legs, figuring out interpretations, or just like nuts and bolts of how to run a business. I'm not a business lady, but I've just been kind of, stumbling along myself. So at the very least, I can tell you what I've done and help, you avoid the same mistakes that I have made. So anyway, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all of your participation out there on the internet. I appreciate all of you so much. Take care out there. So to just last thing, state of the world, state of being and everything, make sure that you are calling your representatives, doing everything that you can do to take care of yourself as well. This is a long road to, world peace, right? We're all working toward it. If you're also new to me, know that I mess with the Buddhism. The Buddhism's coming in. We're talking about world peace in a non-ironic way. So this is why I'm always posting animal memes. It's not because I don't care about what else is going on in the world. It's because we need some serotonin sometimes. We got to make this sustainable. This is a long, long road. So take care of yourselves, take care of each other, be kind to each other, um, and call your representatives and tell them to stop funding war. Tell them to speak out for peace. Do the right things, right? That we all know to do. If we're an adult, we shouldn't need to have someone else tell us what the right thing is to do, but I'm going to use my platform and do that. So again, take care of yourself. Have a happy holiday. I'm not going to see you all till after the holidays. I'm going to be doing some traveling, but I'll be around on my email. I might be late, like the 21st of December to the 27th of December. Probably not going to be answering my email. Hell, you know what? Probably not going to answer my email from like the 27th to the 30th because it's those really spicy days we talked about. Like 26th is my birthday. I'm just going to talk about myself for a second. The 26th is my birthday. Oh my God. Can we just go to here? Um, for those of you who know like solar returns, look at this shit. Now this is again, I'm just kind of a mess lately and kind of showing people how not to use astrology. Don't use it as just like a scaffolding to worry. But at the same time, we speaking of threat assessment, this is what astrology is for. And I bring you my solar return chart. Look at this. Look at this trash. This is my solar return chart. I pretty much, I don't know. I'm not going to be answering emails on my birthday, but I probably won't answer emails for a few days. I don't know. I might have to lay low. I might have to not get myself in trouble this year. I think, I'm trying to find good ways to interpret this chart. And I am trying to really get going on my passive income business model, like creating lecture content for people to learn from. I'm trying to really do a wide steering of changing how I do business and changing, where I focus my efforts. As much as I love doing consultation, and I'm still going to keep doing that. Before I was an astrologer, I was a pharmacist for 9, 10 years. So I'm used to working with people one-on-one all the time. I do have other things I want to do. I want to create lectures. I want to present information and help people learn astrology and use astrology effectively in a way that doesn't make us crazy in our brain. Like I would love to tell people how to do that. So yeah, like there's definitely some things changing. So I'm hoping it's about that. Um, we'll see. If it wasn't a 12th house year, I might be less worried. But as Adam Summer says, Adam Summer is my first astrologer. He says we don't know enough to worry. And he's mostly correct. So I try to tell myself that too. We don't know enough to worry, right? But I'm still gonna. Yeah, thank you. Oh, hi, Madam Dram. How's it going? Long time no see. Or maybe you've been there and I just didn't notice. I'm so sorry, but thank you. Merry birthday indeed. I'm usually in my parents' basement, but I'm not going to be this year. I'm actually going to be enjoying myself, not in my parents' basement, but back in Madison, Wisconsin, with people that I love, well, I love my family too, but friends who I can party with. I mean, not that I can't party with my parents. I'm very lucky that I can, but I party with them. I'm telling on myself. I party with my parents mostly on my birthday. It's usually them. Like, it doesn't need to be them every year. Some years okay. Anyway, I'm embarrassing myself. I swear I don't live in my parents' basement. All right. I love you all. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Do all the nice, cool things in the world that you can do to make everybody feel better and not feel worse. All right.